Alex says manifestation is bullshit.
Manifestation is bullshit, and action is the only thing that matters.
Wouldn't you say that manifestation is the first step before action?
So it depends on how we define manifestation. So if we define manifestation as like an electrical signal occurs in your brain, sure. But I don't think that's how most people describe it. So
this is interesting because, Graham is pretty big into manifestation. And Alex says manifestation is utter bullshit.
I would say be totally on board with manifestation if we define it as knowing that. Like, I know that this is possible. Like I saw this, or I have some perspective that has changed. To me, that's just knowledge. So if you have knowledge that you can start a bank, you have to have the knowledge that you can start a bank before you start a bank. That makes sense. So fine. But the bank doesn't occur until you take the action. But the idea of like the mindless ideation of like, I'm going to manifest my husband into existence is, I think, relatively bullshit. Now, that being said, there's some people who do that and then also take actions that then change their circumstances, and then they get the husband and then they misattribute what was the thing that caused it. And so for me, I mean, fundamentally the position that I'm in is trying to identify causal relationship as accurately as possible. And so, the logical proof that I use with this is just simply mindset plus no action, no outcome. Mindset plus action, outcome. No mindset, action, outcome. So the action is really going to be the only thing that's going to.
I would argue that
create
you
the
need
outcome.
mindset. You need some sort of mindset to have the action. Like I'm kind of big into manifestation,
Yeah.
so it's interesting for me
That was
to
my
hear
hell
your perspective.
There you go.
Like, to me, like the example of
People get so upset by this, by the way, when I bring this
I
up.
find it really interesting.
What's
So,
their
like,
main contention with it?
Well, they have a history of being reinforced for talking to other people about manifestation. And so they want to talk about it, have other people nod and smile and agree with them. And those are all pro-social behaviors. And so I think it makes sense that they would do that. Again, it depends on how we define manifestation, which I've yet to find anyone who's been able to define it well. Action you can define really easily.
So this should be interesting because him saying that there's nobody that's been able to define it well. Hopefully I imagine, I haven't seen this, but I imagine Graham or Jack is about to define manifestation. We'll see.
And so that's the part, right? So it's really just this word that has all these positive connotations.
I just think it helps you with focus.
But like,
And it
what is
helps you-
manifestation?
let's say let's just say
Okay, see? That's crazy. I swear I haven't seen this at all. Now he's about to define it. Let's see what's up.
the boyfriend-girlfriend example,
Okay.
where you manifest the perfect.
But what is manifestation?
But what is it?
You thinking clearly about your wants, needs, goals, what to look for, who this
So
person
prioritization.
is. Correct. Now,
That's a horrible definition. That's not. What's the difference between prioritization and manifestation then? That's not a good definition. You're just talking about, I want my bills to be in order. I want to find a good significant other. I want to start a business. My priorities are so, and so. That's not manifestation. That's just prioritization.
manifesting that, you're going to be on the lookout for those sort of
But
qualities.
is the manifesting
in
the
another person.
prioritization, or we said prioritization and then manifesting?
So I think the problem is that you're kind of using a derivative definition
Right.
of
Yeah.
prioritization.
This is
Yeah.
fundamentally why
Yeah, that's Jack's right. We're using another definition. We're using a whole nother word. Period. So Alex is right. Nobody can define it well.
have an issue with.
And then because you're using manifestation to indicate some sort of data or information, a lot of people that have a different definition of manifestation are going to apply that to their definition of
I just
manifestation.
think people
and then
know
it's
what
gonna-
manifestation is.
No,
It's
they
just-
don't. That's
I
actually
think
my
a lot
point.
of people think like you sit down and you manifest something and then they think it's going to walk right through that door. Like they think that cosmically everything
Yeah.
just like somehow bestow.
Like
See,
law
I
of
think-
attraction,
I think
I don't believe
that's
in.
doing better than
Ooh,
nothing.
Law of attraction, he said he doesn't believe in, which is a really, really big part of manifestation.
But
I don't think so,
that
because there's data that shows that you can trigger the same dopamine receptors when you think about getting $1 billion than when you get $1 billion. Like it's a similar thing. Obviously, it's going to be a lot less intense when you think about it, but when you daydream about all these amazing things that are happening, it doesn't actually change the reality of your existence. It's only giving you small dopamine spikes.
When you could get yourself to have a firm belief that something is going to happen and that nothing is going to get in the way, your actions are going to be reinforced by that.
Well, the action is the only thing that will matter.
I think there's got to be a belief in yourself to stick with those actions.
You have declarative knowledge, but also those are skills.
Belief is not the same thing as manifesting. It's still two different things. Believing in yourself and taking action. That's why a lot of people will drown themselves into podcast after podcast, pay for course after course after course, and on real estate, and then been doing a whole lot of research and studying, but never taking action, never building anything. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later, all you've been doing is reading books, looking at other people's podcasts, signing up for other people's Patreons, making other people rich, and you're just sitting there absorbing all this knowledge and information, doing nothing with it. If you don't apply it to action and actually do something with it, you're never going to have anything. All you're going to be doing is making other people rich, and then you're going to have to, or I'm going to have to keep on working a W-2 job, a 9 to 5, or whatever times you work, and nothing's ever going to happen. He's right. Action is the only thing that matters. Now, that being said, I love The Secret. Law of Attraction, I love it. I don't apply it like it probably should be applied, though. I think you have to put action behind it. You can think, believe, prioritize all day long, but until you take action and build something to grow, you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to continue doing the same thing over and over. I want to start a YouTube channel. Look at YouTube channel builders and Think Media and all these other sources after source after source. I want to get into the stock market. Start looking at these stock market channels. You're never doing anything. You have to take action. You can overload with self-help, improvement, and all this other bullshit that you just keep on reading and learning and attempting to understand. But until you do something, nothing's going to happen. Rant over. My bad.
And so, if someone tries 100 times versus 10 times, I would say the fact that they took more action is the reason they got to where they're trying to go. Now, when we try to get to why did they do that? I don't think anyone has the answer to that. And I think the reason for that is because no one knows why they do it.
I think they have a core belief in what they're doing.
So
that dealing is going to have an outcome.
To defend Graham, when I first reached out to Graham to try to provide value to him.
You manifested this.
Exactly. I sat in my room like
you manifested this podcast.
So I had no skills whatsoever.
Ooh. I was wondering when he was going to start taking up for Graham. Jack was nothing. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but if you look up, I actually have looked it up, and he just reached out to Graham like as a YouTube fan and subscriber, and said, I want to start a podcast, and gave him his ideas. Had no experience, had no really understanding or rhyme or reason on why he should be able to do the podcast, and then started Iced Coffee Hour, and now it's as big as it is. But that being said, did he manifest it or prioritize it or believe it? Which one was it? In that case, it seems to me like he did actually manifest something, but he took action, right? He took action and made it happen, but it was because Graham allowed it. You know what I mean?
The only thing that I had was high confidence in my aptitude and competence. Mm-hmm. I knew that I could provide value, but it was more of just something that existed in my brain. I don't know if I necessarily had evidence to support that.
Sure.
I just knew that I was competent enough. And so maybe I manifested that. One could argue that.
So the big zooming all the way out here, just for context, I think the reason that people get really up in arms about it is because, like, I mean, these are dogmas, right? These are belief systems which people operate at their very core, which really just means ways of being, which means ways of behaving, and ways of talking is included in that in terms of behavior. But people have a very hard time defining what the hell they're talking about when we ask some of these words that are amorphous. And so I have, by and large, just removed them from my vocabulary so that I can describe the observable. And it has been probably the single most productive thing that I have done in my career. And so is it a small hill? It is probably the only hill and the main hill that I will die on, which is that behavior rules everything.
It's funny because Alex is always moving words out of something. I remember watching something on him. I don't remember. I just know he's always removing certain words that doesn't matter, like manifestation, and turning it into action is the only thing that matters. He's done it in something else too.
And you have a history of past, reinforcers or punishers for a set of behaviors, and you repeat them in the future. And that's the only thing that I will say about why someone does something. You've been rewarded in the past for reaching out to people for doing things. And it can be cross-domain. So it's like maybe you reached out to girls and they was able to jump into business, and you were able to reach out to business owners. So it was
Definitely
cross-domain.
not the girls, though.
Well,
Absolutely
I know that. I know.
no.
It's hypothetical.
help,
Obviously not
please,
Jack.
please
But
help.
like, but you get the idea of like it's but like those are just sets of skills. Those are behaviors. And so focusing exclusively on behaviors and unbundling terms that are amorphous has been, I think, the key to my ability to communicate to people, train staff, and kind of enlist people to where we're trying to go. And I think that that has really been, like, when people are like, man, I feel like Alex is so good at making things clear. It's like, because I just do not use amorphous language. And if I'm going to use a term, I will define the term
So now
by the observable.
But I believe to shift belief starts with mindset.
Well, it's like
Which
so many.
starts
It's like
with
what's belief, what's
manifesting
what's belief, what's mindset, what's manifesting. You know
manifesting
where
is
I'm going with
like-
this is like, this isn't not to put, like, I actually I just want to help, not you guys, everyone else. No, but I don't think it serves people, and that's why. And like, I just don't like. Now some people are like, I mean, yes, you feel great about it. I'm glad that if you had the option between making 100 phone calls and sitting there and manifesting, you will get further making 100 phone calls. And so I'm trying to decrease the amount of
That's good. He's right. You can manifest something all day long, or you can do something. You can manifest thinking about making 100 phone calls. I'll do it tomorrow, or you just shut the fuck up, get on the phone, make 100 phone calls, and imagine how much more sales you're going to have. Imagine how much more success. Imagine how much more significance that's going to play when you make 100 phone calls versus just thinking about it.
the time it takes people to just do the thing.
It's funny, the first podcast we had with you, you were mentioning that you had recently removed the word, I think it was
should.
Yeah. You had also
Unbelievable. That's crazy.
removed like because.
Yeah, causal relationships. We don't know.
You remove all of these words, and every single podcast you're like, I've since removed this word.
Yeah.
And now I guess it's just like you've gone to the meta of just reducing amorphous descriptions of things.
Just to the observable.
Just to the observable on this existence.
I'll call this. I think that the book that I write on behavior will outsell all of my books put together.
Ooh.
Tell us about the book.
Wow. Do you know how many books he has sold? Hold on. I'll look it up.
On behavior. I'm curious.
Well,
it's not.
it's outlined.
You're
but
cooking
it's,
now.
Yeah, it's cooking. But I have this belief, and it's probably my own limitation, but I want to have a publicly verified $1 billion plus
How many books
net worth,
has Alexander
so that I can
sold?
then, I think, have the pedestal, or at least the pedestal, not the right word.
Credentials.
I'll give you an explanation of what I mean by this. So it's like, in the beginning, we have to start defining terms of like, what's the meta concept that I kind of operate off of? And the biggest one is fundamentally that, like, what is learning, right? Like, what is learning?
Adaptation.
So it's same condition, new behavior. That's fundamental. Like from a behavioral science perspective, it's like if you're person is condition A, and then we teach them something, when they re-enter condition A, they change their behavior. So it's observable. So same condition, new behavior. If the phone rings and you say XYZ, and then I say, hey, don't say XYZ, say ZYW. The phone rings again, you say XYZ, you haven't learned. If you say ZYW, you have learned. If you say something else, you've learned, but the wrong thing, right? But fundamentally, it's a change in behavior within the same condition. And so it's like, okay, if we say that as kind of like tenet number one, the next tenet is like, okay, then what is intelligence? So intelligence is going to be rate of learning. So if I have to do that, example 10 times with, Jack and 5 times with Graham, then Jack has less intelligence than Graham does in this context. This is a hypothetical Jack and a hypothetical Graham. These names are completely taken at random. But then it's like that. But the reason I think that's important is because then it allows people to have direct influence on their own intelligence. So if you learn faster, you change your behavior faster than somebody else, then you can in a very real way be more intelligent than them. And so when we asked originally, like, do you have to have raw intelligence? I think it depends on what type of intelligence we're talking about when it comes to learning behaviors. This is how I define it. But beyond that, it's like, okay, well then, like a lot of words have been like, so what's an excuse? So like an excuse is a statement to avoid punishment, which is very simple. It's like, okay, it's a statement that like someone says something like, what's an excuse? Like, show me when an excuse has occurred. And by looking at like, patience, I've defined this plenty of times because I had to use it all the time, which is figuring out what to do in the meantime. So if you say to a young kid, be patient, they don't know what that means. It's a bundled term. It means nothing. Be patient. It means nothing. So how would I give some directions on how to be patient? Figure out something else to do. That's all you have to do. We are all being patient right now for our S&P 500 accounts. We're being paid. We're doing something else. That's all we have to do is just something.
He sold as of April 2025, Alex Hormozi has sold over 1 million copies of his book, 10 million series, 10M series of books. This includes his books, 10 million offers, how to make offers so good people feel stupid saying no, 100M leads, how to get strangers to want to buy your stuff, and over 1 million copies of this series has been sold. He has also authored another book, Gym Launch Secrets. Hold up. Mouth dry as hell. Excuse me. 100 million series. He has also authored Gym Launch Secrets, the step-by-step guide to building a massively profitable gym, for which specific sales figures are less readily available but contributed to his earlier success. And he's saying this book on behavior is going to outsell everything he's ever done put together. Holy shit.
Something else. And so it makes patience operationalized, right? Like, how can I do patience? I have
So you're really just kind of redefining all of these words, or at least simplifying
the words
them.
that are important, and by defining them, it's more putting them into a context that
We're all talking on the same plane.
well, it's defining them within the observable universe.
Oh.
It's that way we can all agree. These are the things that we see. When someone has exhibited resiliency, it means that they've returned to a baseline of behavior. And how resilient they are depends on how quickly they do that. If someone's not very resilient, it means that they extend the change in behavior for a long period of time. If they're permanently, quote, traumatized, it means they never change their behavior, right? So it's like, what's trauma, right? Trauma is a permanent change of behavior based on an aversive stimulus, a negative stimulus, right? But then the question is, okay, if we have this trauma, right? And then people are like, I store trauma in my spine. It's like, what? Where is there a hard drive in your, like, what cell is this being? People just say things. And so it's a permanent change of behavior from something bad happening. Okay, now if you're a little baby and you touch a stove and it burns your hand, and that's an aversive stimulus, and you change your behavior, you don't touch hot stoves again, was trauma bad?
I love that. I actually once you said that, you're redefining everything into.
I love that too. They say, you know how this old saying, sometimes you got to learn from doing, so the action or trauma from learning something so critical and crucial, like touching a hot stove, now in your mind is engraved. I will never touch the top of a stove without making sure it's cool first. Apply that behavior modification into everything, and that's pretty good shit, man. I gotta say, I'm not the biggest, most huge fan of Alex, but that's good shit right there.
To terms of the observable universe, I think that I
it'll be more. I think it'll be my most successful.
Observable universe. I actually
don't touch hot stoves again. and it burns your hand, and that's an aversive stimulus, and you change your behavior, you don't touch hot stoves again. Was trauma bad?
I love that. I actually once you said that you're redefining everything into terms of the observable universe. I think that I could
it'll
not
be.
be more
I think it'll be
excited
my
to read
most. I think it'll be my most successful.
I'm
thing we
curious
put
though
out.
for something as I would say like
what's courage?
like-
What's courage, right? So the interval of time, a potentially bad thing affects whether you do it.
what about something that's so like purpose or meaning? Those I feel like are really like I can't imagine how to define those.
I don't know. I think they're definable. It just takes a long time to really think. Like the question you have to answer is, what would someone do for me to say purpose has occurred?
I guess maybe
And
you
so
could
that's why it's so
track
hard.
something.
That's why you have to completely shift how you're seeing things and be able to observe them kind of like firsthand. And so it's like, what's authenticity? It's how you behave when you have no risk of punishment.
And someone that obeys all of the terms that you've outlaid in that book.
It's not even obeying. It's just like, this is I
Sure.
have to define these terms in order to talk about them because they're also amorphous. And if I never define them, then I would just be making face noise and other people would be perceiving my face noise in whatever way they think it means, which they haven't defined anyways. And so then there'd be a lack of communication. I think fundamentally like good communicators are able to transfer ideas efficiently because they use language that everyone understands and ideally things that everyone can observe with their own two eyes. And so I try and stick to everything being observable. And so as a result, it's made persuasion way easier. The most important one is that like, if I want to train, which happens a lot in a business setting, it's like, how do you train someone? And you're like, be more confident. What does that mean? Tell a 6-year-old, be confident. It means nothing. It means nothing. They might just say like, that means talk louder. I don't know what that means, right?
That's true. I'm a really, really big fan of competence. I think it's the most sexiest, attractive thing in a female is competence and independence. But if I was telling my daughter that, not even a 6-year-old, a 13-year-old, what would that fucking mean to her? You know what I mean? What would it mean? Let's see.
And so it's a bundled term. So we have to break the term down. It's like, okay, well, this is actually a series of many behaviors underneath of confidence that when taken in aggregate, we then describe that person as confident. So maybe they look at you in the eyes when they talk. Maybe they nod their head when they're listening. Maybe they repeat back the last thing that you said. Maybe when there's something that has potential risk or downside, they're willing to do it. Like these are all things that we can observe. And they say, okay, well, if you have these, you exhibit these traits, these skills in this setting, people describe you as confident. Does that make sense? And so being able to break things down like that has allowed me to help my team when I'm like, hey, like a dick, but he was a star performer. So we're like, okay, well, let's see if we can save him, And so we talked to 3 or 4 of the leaders in the company and he was still a dick. And so I was like, well, what'd you tell him? We're like, oh, we told him to stop being a dick. I was like, okay, well, so I ended up meeting with him and I was like, I want to be clear. I don't really care if you're a dick or not. I do care if people describe you as a dick. I want to, like, the purpose of this meeting is to decrease the likelihood that anyone talks to me about you again in a negative context. Cool? Great. So that was the agenda. It's like, all right, so in order for that to occur, let's talk about the things that when you do them, people don't like them and they call you a dick. So it's like when you interrupt people during a meeting, they think you're a dick and they call you a dick later. When you tell someone how to do their job, they call you a dick and you try and force your agenda, whatever. It was 2 or 3 examples. And he was like, so that's all I have to do. I was like, yep, that's all you have to do. He's like, but what if, I present this thing and then they don't execute on it? I was like, then that's not on you. That's on the manager. And I'll talk to the manager and make sure that they're executing. But that's not on you. That's not your role. And so once that got clear, all of a sudden, he just stopped doing the 3 things that the 3 behaviors that people then laddered up to saying he's a dick. And then they stopped calling him a dick. And then everyone's like, oh, he's like night and day, totally different. But it was just like, no one's specific with their language, and so no one knows what anyone's talking about. And I think the vast majority of people don't communicate well with one another because both.
He was being a dick. Here's a few things that he was doing that people called him a dick over. Stop doing those things. Don't interrupt people. Don't tell somebody else how to do their job and whatever the fuck else it was. Now, all of a sudden, he's the coolest guy ever. Action.
Both people are saying words that neither person understands and no one's defined anything. And that's why most people can't communicate at all. And that's why most people, they want the other person to guess what behavior they don't like. And so it's like, even if I said, oh, John's lazy, you have to think, and this is why most people don't do it, is because it takes work. You have to think, okay, I think John's lazy. Why do I think John's lazy? What occurred? What did I observe that then made me think that? Now you might find out it's like, he's actually just slow to respond. Okay. Is there anything else? There was one meeting he came ill prepared. Is there anything else? No, I think that was actually it. Okay. So when I go to John, instead of being like, hey, you're lazy, I'm going to say, hey, I need you to speed up your responses to under 5 minutes. And when you come to a meeting, have your notes ahead of time. Just send them to me.
That's what I just did. Sped up their responses to 1.5 playback speed. This is how I watch all my videos. And I'm going to start recording some reactions the same way to see how it goes over.
All of a sudden, John's not lazy anymore. But it's because it was this very micro thing that we then ladder up to this amorphous term that no one can understand. And so this has been a huge area of interest for me in defining reality. And I think that honestly, it's helpful.
See, this is 1.5 speed, but you can still perfectly, you can, as long as you're intelligent, you can perfectly understand what they're saying. And now you can absorb. If you do want to take more in and you do like watching videos, but just be careful on how much you're watching these videos. And you got to make sure you're taking action behind them. I've got goals and dreams and stuff, and I have taken a lot of action to get my little bit of 17,000 subscribers, right? I need to increase my watch time, so I'm reacting to more videos. Action. I'm putting action behind my manifestations, if you will.
Helps me navigate reality really well and make higher quality decisions.
If someone reads this book, how would it be actionable for them to get those ideas across with somebody else who hasn't read the book and
They would have to
is
define the
totally
terms.
lost?
They would have to define the terms.
That's it's getting a complicated word and then simplifying it into the layman.
Right. So then we don't have,
layman
well, they're currently not communicating with that person. So like, how would they talk to somebody who hasn't read the book? The way they always do, which is nothing. Which the thing is the point that you hit on underpins the fact that most people can't communicate well at all.
Right.
And so if a lot of people want to be different than they are, and I am, first in line on that. There are many things that I've wanted to be different about myself for a very long period of time. And this book and these ideas have been the culmination of trying to change these things about myself. I would say I want to be more authentic. And I'm like, well, what's authenticity? How do I be more authentic? What do I do? Well, it's like, okay, well, authenticity is how you behave when there's no risk of punishment. And so if there's no risk of punishment, how you behave basically, if you're alone and no one can find out what you do, that's you authentically. Now, the problem is that in society, we also have rules that govern other people's behavior, right? Which means that the only truly authentic person is someone who behaves the exact same way alone as they do in public, with freedom. And when they act with complete freedom, act within the rules of the law. Anyone else who has any inclination to do anything that's outside of society's preferences or the rules that govern how we interact with each other or the laws, right, has to, by their very definition, not be authentic or be less than 100% authentic. And I see many of these traits as not binaries, are you authentic or not authentic, but how authentic are you? And also in the setting. And if it's like, man, this sounds like it's a little bit more complex, it's like, yeah, welcome to reality. Is being 100% authentic something that I should be?
I mean, realistically, probably not.
Right. And so again, but the thing is, once we define the term, we actually can have a discussion about it because now we're all talking the same language. And it's much more productive. And it's also way less charged from 100% of the time. It's like, wait, so you're lying to people, right? And it's like, we don't define the term and then all of a sudden we're attacking each other rather than just saying like, well, no, I act differently in private, but I'm being a little bit inauthentic right now. I'm wearing clothing. I normally wouldn't wear clothing, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, and so again, what it does is it adds nuance, but box with clean lines and say like, this is the way it is. And I don't think reality is that way. Like, it's not, is this person honest or dishonest? It's how honest are they? How loyal are they?
I'm curious, you take a blank slate person, they read and apply everything that you write in this book. What does their life look like a year down the road, 5 years down the road?
Great question. So the book will by no means be here's how to live life, because that assumes that I know and that I think they should do something. I think it's more, if you want these things, these are the recipes for achieving them. So if you want to be perceived as patient, figure out things to do in the meantime. If you want to be perceived as authentic, behave more in a way that you do in private and public. If you want to be perceived as more courageous, then decrease the time between when you perceive something as risky and when you take action on it. Like,
will you read this book? Let me know in the comments if you've even gotten this far in the video. Especially, let me know in the comments if you will read Alex's book on behavior. I guess it's going to be like behavior modification.
all of a sudden it's like, oh, so I want these traits. And so this would, in my opinion, be the first way that, at least the first place I've seen, where there's like a recipe, like do this. How would you explain it to a child who doesn't know what the words mean? And I think that's what allows, it's what allowed me, it's what has allowed me to exhibit more traits that I wanted to have versus traits that I didn't want to have. And until I had that, I just was like, why do people describe me this way? Just because I couldn't break down what I had to change what I did to change basically reality.
You're in a great position to talk about it too. It's interesting because you've mentioned this years ago that you had an issue, I think it was with anger, and you also had the patience thing.
Yeah.
But it does appear as though you've made pretty significant strides in applying corrective behavior to those
More on patience,
traits.
less on anger, but better.
And how does anger affect negatively maybe your business or your life? Like, what have you noticed?
Okay, well, I'd say that the negative effects of anger for me have probably just come in almost entirely from the way that people treat me, not in terms of negative outcomes business-wise. I think a reason that I still have anger is because it has served me. So I think we repeat things that have served us in the past. And so I think one of the reasons that people misunderstand why they do things is because people ask the question, what triggered that? You ever heard that? It's like, oh, something triggered this behavior. But it's not about what happened before. It's about what happened after, the last time you did it. So I'll give you a real example. So if Layla gets upset, and this is something that I've really actively worked a lot on. If Layla gets upset and she gets like, she cries if we're having some, whatever. I had a tendency to try and comfort for a short period. And then if that didn't work, I would get angry. When I would get angry, she would get scared. When she would get scared, she would stop crying. And so when I got angry, she stopped crying. And so I learned that if I got angry, I got my wife to stop crying. And so it was a very reinforcing. I only figured that out later.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very reinforcing thing. It's like, this gets Layla to stop crying, right? And so to the same degree, so I've been rewarded in that setting. But obviously, she's like long-term endurance. So then I have to work on that, right? If I value the relationship, which I do. But the same context with my team, right? If I am quick to anger, be cold or sharp with someone, and it doesn't even have to happen often. Like if you do it once or twice, or even if you do it in front of someone, not directed towards them, they're like, well, I never want, because modeling is a great way that people learn. If someone shows up late and I yell at that person, then that everyone else is still afraid of me.
It's confusing though, buddy. Layla, like you're gonna be, getting angry makes them stop crying. So that behavior, that's what you're going to do to make things. Just because you want somebody to stop crying, you're gonna get angry. That's kind of I don't understand that. I don't understand that point.
Me and doesn't want to show up late either, right? And so what happens is the flow of communication from other people to me slows down because they're afraid of getting punished by me. And so I see that as not positive for the business, is me not having the information. Now, how do I cover for that? Well, I have somebody like Layla who always gets all the information, and that's why she's CEO and doesn't have direct reports. And so we've been able to manage that within the business operationally. But in terms of me personally, like I want to be better about that. And so that's like an example of
very, very little patience, unfortunately, for it. And it's one of my shortcomings.
Yeah.
Since you fixed that, how have you noticed? If someone's emotional to me, I have very, very little. What's interesting is I kind of have a similar thing in terms of like if someone's emotional to me, I have very, very little patience, unfortunately, for it. And it's one of my shortcomings.
Yeah.
Since you fixed that, how have you noticed?
Fixed,
well,
better.
Sure. Okay. Since you try to improve upon that, how have you noticed that change in real observable ways?
Well, I mean, Layla has now also, because she understands how this stuff works too, because we talk about it all the time, like she has tried to reinforce whenever I'm not angry and she's upset. And so either in the moment or immediately afterwards, she's like, thank you for not getting upset, and thank you for being there for me, and thank you for just hugging me, and just waiting it out essentially. And so I just have to remember that when I'm in those settings, and the more time she reinforces
Okay, that answers my question.
it, the less strong the other reinforcer is, the stronger the new one is. A lot of this stuff has come from suffering, like being like, why can't I be this way? Like I want to be this way and I can't. Like why can't I? And it's like, because I don't know how. Why don't I know how? Because I have no words to describe how to do it well. So how do I change this in reality? And so it's been the result of like this is how it works.
But you're able to assign a new timeline in terms of when you learn something to a longer period of time, rather than most people, which assess things over see way deeper into the future and then make decisions based off of that.
You mean that this isn't going to work long term?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll get feedback. I mean, to be fair, I'll get feedback immediately afterwards where, we change them. And ideally, we want to have some sort of reward cycle as fast as possible with that new behavior. And I think that's how fundamentally you can change what you do, which then ladders up to who you are.
Okay, somehow my video, because I talk so much, is 32 minutes. Nobody's going to watch that all the way through, so that sucks. I did not mean to go that much over. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I will put the original video in my description. Hope you guys have a great day. KP out.